Chapter 1. Sacred Sanctuary. Amara's fingers worked methodically through the dried chamomile petals, crushing each fragment between her fingertips until the herb released its honey-sweet essence into the moonlit air. The small laboratory tucked away in the east wing of the pack house had become her refuge, a place where the suffocating weight of expectations couldn't reach her. Silver light streamed through the tall windows, casting dancing shadows across shelves lined with glass vials and carefully labeled jars. Each container held secrets harvested from the surrounding forest: wolfsbane for protection, valerian root for restless sleep, ginger for the nausea that had been plaguing her mother lately. Strange, since werewolves rarely fell ill. Her wolf, Lyra, paced restlessly beneath her skin. The beautiful silver-gray creature had been agitated for weeks now, sensing something that Amara's human consciousness couldn't quite grasp. Tonight felt different, though, charged with an electricity that made her skin prickle and her heart race. "Focus," she whispered to herself, grinding the chamomile with renewed determination. The laboratory door creaked open behind her. Amara didn't need to turn around because the crisp scent of winter pine and authority announced her visitor's identity. Luna Selene Moonfang entered with the same measured grace she brought to everything: calculated, controlled, cold. "Still playing with your little plants, I see." The dismissive tone sliced through Amara's peaceful moment like a blade through silk. She continued working, refusing to give her mother the satisfaction of an immediate response. The chamomile turned to powder beneath her persistent grinding. "They're not plants, Mother. They're medicine." Amara's voice remained steady despite the tremor running through her hands. "Healing arts that our pack has forgotten in favor of brute strength." Celine's heels clicked against the stone floor as she approached. Each step echoed with purpose, with finality. The sound reminded Amara of a countdown. "Your healing arts won't matter where you're going." Now Amara did turn, her jade green eyes meeting her mother's arctic blue gaze. Something twisted in her stomach. Not the gentle flutter of intuition, but the sharp clench of dread. "What do you mean?" Celine's lips curved into what might have been a smile on anyone else's face. On hers, it looked like the expression of a predator who had cornered her prey. "Alpha Draven Blackthorn has agreed to accept you as his mate. The ceremony will take place in 3 days." The words hit Amara like physical blows. The glass vial in her hand slipped, shattering against the floor in a crystalline explosion that seemed to echo forever. "No." The word emerged as barely a whisper. "You can't. I won't." "You will do your duty to this pack." Celine's voice never wavered, never softened. "The Blackthorn Alliance will secure our northern borders and guarantee our survival through the coming conflicts." Lyra snarled within Amara's chest, claws scraping against her ribs in protest. The wolf understood what her human half was still struggling to accept. They were being sold like livestock. "Draven is twice my age. He's cruel, Mother. Everyone knows what happened to his last mate. What happened to Helena Blackthorn is pack business, not gossip." Celine's eyes flashed with warning. "Draven has agreed to overlook your deficiencies in exchange for the Union." Deficiencies. The word burned through Amara's chest like acid. Her mother meant her late shifting. She hadn't received her wolf until 18, 3 years later than normal. Most pack members whispered that she was broken, damaged somehow. Only Amara knew the truth. Lyra had been waiting for something. Someone.
"I won't marry him." Amara straightened her spine, drawing on reserves of courage she didn't know she possessed. "You will." Selene moved closer, her presence filling the small space like poison gas. "Because if you don't, Alpha Marcus will challenge Draven for breach of contract. Your father is strong, but he's not young anymore. He won't survive a fight with the Blackthorn Alpha." The threat hung in the air between them, crystal clear and devastating. Choose Draven, or watch her father die. Amara's hands shook as she bent to collect the larger pieces of broken glass. The sharp edges cut into her palms, but the physical pain felt distant compared to the agony tearing through her heart. "The announcement will be made tomorrow evening," Selene continued, her voice returning to its usual emotionless cadence. "Draven will arrive the following morning to begin the courting rituals. I suggest you use the remaining time to adjust your expectations." The Luna's heels clicked toward the door, each step driving nails into Amara's coffin of dreams. But at the threshold, Selene paused. "Clean up this mess. And Amara?" She didn't turn around. "Don't embarrass our family any more than you already have." The door closed with a soft snick that sounded like a prison cell locking. Alone again, Amara sank to her knees among the scattered glass and crushed herbs. The chamomile's sweet scent mixed with the copper tang of her blood, creating a strange perfume of broken dreams and shattered hopes. Lyra whimpered deep in her chest, the sound full of a longing that had no name. Her fingers closed around a particularly sharp shard of glass. For just a moment, she imagined what it would feel like to know. She dropped the fragment as if it had burned her. Running away was one thing, giving up entirely was another. But as she knelt there in the ruins of her sanctuary, surrounded by the tools of her healing craft and the weight of an impossible choice, one thought crystallized in her mind with startling clarity. She would not go quietly to her cage. Chapter 2. Gilded Chains. The great hall buzzed with anticipation that made Amara's skin crawl. Pack members clustered in excited groups, their voices creating a symphony of speculation and gossip that rose to the vaulted ceiling like incense. She stood on the raised platform beside her parents, feeling like a prize heifer on display. Alpha Marcus Moonfang commanded attention without effort. His silver-streaked dark hair caught the torchlight, and his broad shoulders carried the weight of leadership with practiced ease. But tonight, Amara noticed something new in her father's bearing, a tension that spoke of battles he couldn't fight and choices that weren't his to make. "My fellow wolves," Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the assembled crowd. "Tonight marks a new chapter in our pack's history, an alliance that will strengthen our bloodlines and secure our future." Beside him, Luna Selene radiated cold satisfaction. Her midnight blue gown emphasized her regal bearing, every inch the perfect political Luna. No one looking at her would guess she'd threatened her own daughter's happiness less than 24 hours ago. Amara wore white, the traditional color of purity and new beginnings. The irony tasted bitter on her tongue. The silk dress fit perfectly, crafted specifically for this moment, this announcement that would seal her fate. She felt like a ghost haunting her own life. The massive oak doors at the hall's entrance groaned open, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Alpha Draven Blackthorn entered with the confidence of a conqueror surveying his newest territory. Tall and broad-shouldered, Draven possessed the kind of dark handsomeness that drew eyes and commanded respect. His black hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face and the cold intelligence in his pale gray eyes. But Amara saw what others missed, or chose to ignore: the cruel set of his mouth, the predatory way he moved, the absolute certainty that everything and everyone belonged to him. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and Draven's lips curved into a smile that made her blood freeze. He saw her fear, her revulsion, and he enjoyed it. "Alpha Draven," Marcus called out, extending his hand in greeting. "Welcome to Moonfang territory." "Alpha Marcus, Luna Selene." Draven's voice carried easily through the sudden hush that had fallen over the crowd. "And the lovely Amara." He approached the platform with measured steps, each one bringing him closer to her personal hell. When he reached the raised dais, he didn't take Marcus's offered hand. Instead, he moved directly to Amara. "My bride-to-be," he said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear, "even more beautiful than reported." Before she could react, his hand closed around her wrist. Not painful, but firm enough to communicate ownership. His touch felt wrong, cold where it should have been warm, possessive where it should have been gentle. Lyra recoiled so violently that Amara nearly stumbled. "The joining of our packs has been blessed by the moon goddess herself," Selene announced, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. The ceremony will take place in 2 days' time, uniting the Blackthorn and Moonfang bloodlines in an alliance that will endure for generations. Cheers erupted from the crowd, but they sounded distant and muffled to Amara's ears. The world had narrowed to the feeling of Draven's fingers around her wrist and the way his thumb traced over her pulse point. Claiming, marking, "I have brought gifts," Draven announced, gesturing to several pack members who carried ornate boxes, "to honor my future Luna and cement our alliance." The first box contained a necklace of black diamonds that caught the torchlight like captured starlight. Beautiful, expensive, and heavy as a collar. "For the Luna who will bear my heirs," Draven said, lifting the necklace with one hand while maintaining his grip on her wrist with the other. The crowd murmured appreciation, but Amara heard the underlying message clearly. Not gifts, purchases, payment for property acquired. He fastened the necklace around her throat with practiced efficiency, his fingers lingering at her nape in a touch that made her skin crawl. The diamonds felt cold against her skin, and their weight seemed to increase with each breath. "Beautiful," he murmured. But his eyes weren't on the jewelry. They were fixed on the rapid pulse beating at the base of her throat. "I can't wait to claim what's mine." The words were spoken softly, meant only for her ears, but they carried the force of a death sentence. Amara's vision blurred at the edges, and for a moment she thought she might faint. Only Lyra's sudden surge of protective fury kept her upright. Alpha Marcus stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "The alliance between our packs has been formalized through the ancient blood bond ritual. Our families are now joined in purpose and prosperity." Blood bond. Amara's head snapped toward her father. That was old magic, irreversible and binding across generations. Not just a marriage contract, but a mystical connection that would tie their packs together permanently. Her mother's face revealed nothing, but something flickered behind her arctic eyes. Satisfaction? Relief? Or something else entirely? "Tomorrow night, there will be a celebration feast," Selene announced. "All members of both packs are invited to honor the future alpha pair." Draven finally released Amara's wrist, but not before his thumb pressed once more against her pulse. A promise. A threat. "I look forward to getting to know my bride better," he said, his voice carrying a meaning that made several pack members shift uncomfortably. The formal announcement concluded with more cheers and congratulations, but Amara felt disconnected from it all. She moved through the motions, accepting congratulations, smiling when expected, nodding at appropriate moments. But inside, Lyra paced like a caged animal, growling warnings that no one else could hear. As the crowd began to disperse, Draven leaned close enough that his breath stirred the hair by her ear. 2 days, little Luna. And then you'll learn what it truly means to belong to an alpha." The words sent ice through her veins, but she forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "I look forward to it, Alpha Draven." The lie tasted like poison on her tongue, but it was necessary armor. Let him think her compliant. Let him believe his victory was complete. She would need him to underestimate her for what came next. Because as she stood there in her white dress and black diamond collar, surrounded by the celebration of her own doom, Amara Vale made a promise to herself and to Lyra. She would not submit. She would not break. And she would not go quietly into the cage they'd built for her.
Chapter 3. Whispers in the dark. Sleep eluded Amara like smoke slipping through her fingers. She'd been lying in her bed for hours, staring at the ceiling while her mind raced in circles that led nowhere good. The black diamond necklace sat on her dresser like a sleeping serpent, catching fragments of moonlight and throwing them back in sharp, cold sparks. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Draven's predatory smile and felt the weight of his hand on her wrist. The memory made her skin crawl and Lyra pace restlessly beneath the surface, a constant reminder that her wolf was as disturbed by their fate as she was. The pack house settled around her with the familiar creaks and sighs of old wood adjusting to the cool night air. These sounds had comforted her since childhood, but tonight they felt ominous, like the building itself was holding its breath. Unable to stand another moment of restless torment, Amara slipped from her bed and padded barefoot across the cold floor. The silk nightgown she wore provided little warmth, but she barely noticed. Her mind was focused on the conversation she'd overheard earlier, fragments of words between her mother and the head of household staff about preparations and ensuring everything goes smoothly. The hallway outside her room stretched in both directions, lit by the soft glow of moonlight streaming through tall windows. She moved like a ghost toward the main staircase, her bare feet silent on the thick carpet. Years of sneaking to her laboratory had taught her which floorboards creaked and which steps groaned under pressure. Light spilled from beneath her mother's study door, a golden line that shouldn't have existed at this late hour. Selene rarely worked past midnight, claiming that important decisions required a clear mind and adequate rest. So what kept the Luna awake tonight? Amara pressed herself against the wall beside the door, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain it would give her away. But the voices from within the study were too compelling to ignore. Arrangements are proceeding as planned. Her mother's voice crisp and businesslike despite the late hour. Good. The responding voice made Amara's blood freeze. Draven was here, in her home, discussing arrangements in the middle of the night. I trust there won't be any complications. None. Selene's tone held absolute certainty. Amara is properly trained in pack hierarchy and Luna duties. She understands her role. A low chuckle that raised every hair on Amara's arms. I'm not concerned about her Luna duties, Selene. I'm concerned about her spirit. Broken Lunas are so much easier to manage. The words hit Amara like a physical blow. Broken Luna. They weren't just arranging a political marriage. They were discussing her deliberate psychological destruction. She'll adjust quickly, Selene replied, and there was something in her voice that made Amara's stomach twist. Not the cold certainty she'd expected, but something else. Something that almost sounded like regret? I certainly hope so, for everyone's sake. Draven's voice carried an unmistakable threat. The blood bond ensures our pack's cooperation, but I prefer willing compliance to forced submission. It's less messy. The girl will not cause problems. Selene's voice sharpened slightly, and Amara caught the subtle challenge in her mother's tone. For your pack's sake, I hope you're right. A pause filled with implications that made Amara's skin crawl. I've waited too long for a proper Luna, one with the bloodline strength to bear powerful heirs. Your daughter's late shifting actually works in my favor. Her wolf will be more dependent on her alpha's guidance. Amara's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. They weren't just talking about marriage, they were discussing breeding her like livestock, using her delayed wolf development as evidence that she'd be easier to control. The Vale bloodline has always produced strong pups, Selene said carefully. Amara will serve your pack well. Vale bloodline. Something cold and sharp pierced through Amara's shock. Her mother had never mentioned being a Vale, had always insisted that her maiden name was Silverton, but Amara's grandmother had been a Vale before her marriage. Could there be some significance to that bloodline that she'd never been told? Indeed. The ancient blood runs true, even if diluted by generations of weak pack alliances. Draven's voice held a note of satisfaction that made Amara's stomach turn. I've done my research, Selene. The Vale line may have been dormant for decades, but the power is still there, waiting to be awakened through proper motivation. What power? Amara pressed closer to the door, desperate to understand what they were discussing. The old ways died out for good reason, Selene said, and now her voice definitely carried warning. Some bloodline gifts are better left buried. Perhaps, but I'm not interested in burial. I'm interested in resurrection. Draven's words dripped with dark promise. Your daughter carries more than just diluted alpha blood. She carries the potential for something far more valuable. A soft scraping sound from within the study. A chair being pushed back from a desk. Panic flared through Amara's chest as she realized someone was preparing to leave. "The ceremony will proceed as planned," Selene said with finality. "2 days, Draven, and then she's your responsibility." "My pleasure," came the silky response. Footsteps approached the door. Amara fled down the hallway as quietly as she could manage, her heart pounding and her mind reeling from what she'd overheard. She made it to the main staircase just as the study door opened behind her, golden light spilling into the corridor like a river of secrets. She didn't look back. Instead, she climbed the stairs to her room on trembling legs, each step carrying her further from the truth she'd stumbled upon and closer to a fate that was somehow even worse than she'd imagined. Back in her room, Amara sank onto her bed and stared at the black diamond necklace. The gems seemed to pulse with their own malevolent life, and she understood now that they weren't just symbols of ownership. They were shackles designed to hold something far more precious than her body. They were meant to contain whatever power flowed through her Veil bloodline. And in 2 days, Draven would claim not just her hand in marriage, but access to abilities she didn't even know she possessed. Unless she found a way to stop him first. Lyra stirred within her chest, no longer pacing but poised like a predator preparing to strike. Her wolf understood what her human mind was still struggling to accept. Running away wasn't just an option anymore, it was survival. Chapter 4. Shattered Bonds. Following the dark revelations that shattered her last illusions about family loyalty, Amara's world had narrowed to a single, desperate truth. Tonight was her last chance at freedom. The wedding dress hanging in her armoire seemed to mock her with its pristine beauty, a silk and pearl prison that would seal her fate come morning. She knelt beside her bed, fingers trembling as she wrapped the Veil's bane dagger in soft cloth. The ancient weapon felt warm against her palm, almost alive with some dormant energy that made Lyra pace restlessly beneath her skin. Her wolf sensed what was coming before her human mind fully accepted it. They were leaving. Tonight. "Just a few essentials," she whispered, shoving clothing and basic supplies into a leather satchel. "Travel light. Move fast." The pack house settled into its midnight quiet around her, but Amara knew the illusion of peace wouldn't last. Tomorrow would bring chaos when they discovered her empty room, but by then she'd be deep in neutral territory where even Draven's trackers couldn't follow. Her bedroom door creaked open without warning. Amara spun, heart hammering, expecting to see her mother or some servant sent to check on the bride-to-be. Instead, Draven Blackthorn stepped into her sanctuary like a shadow given flesh and malice. "Going somewhere, little Luna?" His pale eyes swept over her travel clothes and packed bag with predatory satisfaction. He'd been watching, waiting, planning for exactly this moment of rebellion. "The bathroom," she managed, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I couldn't sleep." Draven closed the door behind him with deliberate care, the soft click of the latch sounding like a death knell. "Nervous about tomorrow?" "How touching." He prowled closer, each step calculated to corner her between the bed and window. Escape routes evaporated with each movement until she stood trapped in a cage of muscle and malevolent intent. "I've been thinking about our conversation earlier," he continued, voice dropping to that silky tone that made her skin crawl. "About broken lunas and proper motivation." "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't." His smile revealed teeth that seemed too sharp, too predatory for human form. "But you will." Before she could react, his hand shot out and clamped around her throat. Not gentle, not even rough, brutal enough to cut off air and send panic shooting through every nerve. "The blood bond is already in place," he murmured, thumb pressing against her pulse point. "But I find that early claiming encourages compliance." Lyra snarled, demanding shift and fight and blood. But Amara's human form couldn't break an alpha's grip through strength alone. "Let me go." The words came out strangled, weak. "Never." Draven's free hand traced the line of her jaw with mock tenderness. "You belong to me now, mind, body, and soul. The sooner you accept that, the less unpleasant this has to be. His grip tightened. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision, but instead of the submission he expected, fury blazed through her chest like wildfire. She was not livestock to be claimed, not a possession to be broken. She was a veil. Power erupted from somewhere deep in her bloodline, ancient, primal, and absolutely lethal. The force hit Draven like a physical blow, sending him staggering backward with a roar of shock and pain. The marking attempt had failed spectacularly. Where his canines had tried to pierce her neck, strange symbols now glowed beneath her skin like molten silver. Not a mating mark. Something far older and infinitely more dangerous. "What are you?" he snarled, clutching his burned hand. But Amara was already moving. She grabbed her pack and the wrapped dagger, then sprinted for the window. 3 stories down to the gardens, but Lyra was already surging forward, demanding the shift that would carry them to safety. "Guards!" Draven's bellow shook the pack house. "Stop her!" Too late. Amara dove through the open window just as her bones began to elongate and reshape themselves. The transformation hit her mid-fall, painful, violent, but absolutely necessary. By the time she struck the soft earth below, 4 silver-gray paws absorbed the impact instead of fragile human bones. Lyra stretched powerful muscles and ran. Behind them, the pack house exploded into chaos. Lights blazed in windows. Voices shouted commands. But they were already disappearing into the forest, leaving behind everything they'd ever known for the uncertain promise of freedom. The failed marking burned like acid between her shoulder blades, but the pain only drove her faster. Whatever power had awakened in her bloodline tonight had bought them precious time. Now they just had to stay alive long enough to use it. Chapter 5. Into the Wild. After 3 days of relentless flight through territories that blurred together in an endless tapestry of green, Amara's wolf form finally began to falter. Lyra had pushed beyond normal endurance, driven by the scent of pursuit that never quite faded from their trail. Her paws bled from rough terrain. Her ribs showed through silver-gray fur. The small game she'd managed to catch barely sustained her metabolism, but stopping for proper hunting meant risking capture. Draven's trackers were persistent as bloodhounds. The forest around her now felt different, wilder, less marked by pack boundaries. Ancient pines reached toward a canopy so thick that only fragments of sunlight penetrated to the forest floor. This was neutral ground where rogue wolves carved out desperate existences beyond the protection of organized packs. Dangerous territory for a lone female, but preferable to the cage awaiting her back home. Lyra's nose twitched at unfamiliar scents. Multiple wolves had passed through this area recently, their territorial markings sharp with aggression and hunger. Not the organized patrol patterns of established packs, but the chaotic wanderings of rogues seeking easy prey. Her exhausted state made her vulnerable. She needed shelter, food, and rest. But first, she needed to... The attack came without warning. 4 wolves burst from the undergrowth like shadows given teeth and claws, larger than her, scarred from countless fights, males seeking to claim or destroy anything that wandered into their territory. Lyra spun to face the largest attacker, but her weakened state betrayed her. Claws raked across her ribs, sending bright pain shooting through her system. Blood matted her silver fur. She fought anyway, because surrender meant death or worse. The veil's bane, wrapped carefully and strapped to her back, bounced with each desperate movement. But her wolf form couldn't access the weapon that might save her. Another set of jaws closed around her hind leg. Bone cracked. She went down hard, muzzle striking root and stone until copper flooded her mouth. The rogues circled like vultures, sensing victory. But instead of finishing her quickly, they seemed to savor her helplessness. The pack leader, a massive brute with one torn ear, shifted back to human form just long enough to speak. "Pretty little Luna, all alone in the big bad woods." His laugh held no warmth. "Alpha's gonna love this catch." More rogues, more danger than she'd escaped. Lyra gathered herself for one final surge of defiance, but her strength was gone. Blood loss and exhaustion had taken their toll. The best she could manage was a weak growl that only encouraged her attackers. This was how it ended. Not in Draven's bed, but torn apart by rogues in neutral territory. At least she'd die free. The pack leader lunged for her throat, but instead of fangs finding their mark, a thunderous roar shook the forest. Something massive crashed through the undergrowth, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, moving with predatory grace that spoke of absolute dominance. A blur of midnight black fur and barely contained violence slammed into the rogue leader. The impact sent both wolves tumbling, but only one rose from the tangle of limbs. The newcomer stood over his defeated opponent like some primal god of war. Muscles rippled beneath ebony fur. Golden eyes blazed with intelligence and lethal intent. When he turned that molten gaze on the remaining rogues, they scattered like leaves before a hurricane. Cowards. Bullies who fled when faced with real power. The black wolf approached her slowly, each step deliberate and non-threatening. But Lyra's instincts screamed danger of a different kind. Not the crude brutality of rogues, but something infinitely more compelling. Something that called to her on levels she didn't understand. He shifted back to human form in a fluid motion that spoke of perfect control. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and those same golden eyes that seemed to see straight through her. Handsome in a way that made her wolf whimper with recognition. "Easy, little wolf," he murmured, voice like warm honey over gravel. "You're safe now." Safe. The word was foreign after so many days of running, but as darkness closed around the edges of her vision, one final thought pierced through her exhaustion. She'd found sanctuary. But had she also found something far more dangerous than anything she'd left behind?
Chapter 6. Unexpected Salvation. Previously content with his solitary patrol through the outer boundaries of Shadowclaw territory, Lucian Ashworth now found himself staring down at the most magnificent creature he'd ever encountered. Even unconscious and bloodied, the silver-gray wolf radiated a fierce beauty that made his chest tighten with unfamiliar emotion. His wolf, Kale, paced restlessly beneath his skin with an agitation that bordered on obsession. The massive creature demanded answers Lucian couldn't provide. Why did this stranger's scent make him want to howl? Why did every protective instinct he possessed flare to blazing life at the sight of her injuries? "What have you gotten yourself into, little wolf?" he murmured, gathering her limp form against his chest. She weighed almost nothing, too thin, clearly exhausted from whatever ordeal had driven her into neutral territory. The fact that she'd fought 4 rogues in her condition spoke to either desperation or courage. Possibly both. But it was the scent clinging to her fur that made his blood run cold. Blackthorn pack. Specifically, their alphas marking pheromones mixed with something else. Something that smelled like burned flesh and rage. A failed claiming. Recent enough that the acrid residue still clung to her like invisible chains. Draven, he growled, the name tasting like poison. Lucian had heard rumors about the Blackthorn Alpha's latest political marriage. Some Luna's daughter being bartered for territorial advantages. But if this wolf was the bride-to-be, she'd run rather than submit. Admirable, dangerous, and absolutely certain to bring war to his doorstep once Draven realized where she'd ended up. The irony wasn't lost on him. For months, his dreams had been plagued by visions of silver eyes and desperate pleas for help. Fragments of prophecy that his grandmother claimed meant his mate was in mortal danger. Now here she was, bleeding in his arms like some answer to prayers he'd never dared speak aloud. Alpha? His beta, Marcus, emerged from the tree line with 2 other patrol members. Their expressions shifted from routine alertness to shock as they registered the unconscious female. "Medical emergency," Lucian said simply. "Clear the path back to the pack house." "Sir, is that—" Marcus's nose twitched as he caught her scent signature. Blackthorn territory. If she's running from... then she had good reason. Lucian's tone brooked no argument. "Move." They ran through the forest in formation, Lucian cradling his precious burden while his beta and warriors flanked them against potential threats. but his mind was already racing ahead to the complications this rescue would create. Taking in a runaway Luna was tantamount to declaring war on her former pack. Draven wouldn't simply write off his investment. He'd come for her with everything he had, which meant Lucian needed to understand exactly what, or who, he was protecting. The Shadowclaw packhouse rose from the forest like something carved from living stone. 3 stories of indigenous architecture that blended seamlessly with the surrounding wilderness. It served as both sanctuary and fortress for the most elite warriors in the Northern Territories. Lucian's private suite occupied the entire top floor, a carefully designed space that reflected both his alpha status and his preference for understated elegance. The bedroom's massive 4-poster bed dominated one wall, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the territory he'd sworn to protect. He laid the injured wolf on the bed's silk coverlet, then stepped back to give her space. Shifting while unconscious was dangerous, but her injuries needed treatment that required human form. As if responding to his thoughts, her bones began the fluid restructuring that marked transformation. But instead of the violent convulsions he'd expected from someone in her condition, the shift flowed like water finding its level. When it finished, Lucian found himself staring at the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Delicate features that spoke of aristocratic breeding, skin like pale gold silk, hair the color of moonlight spilling across his pillows, and when her eyes fluttered open, green, not silver as his dreams had suggested, but the deep jade of ancient forests. "Where?" she whispered, voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Safe," he assured her, though the word felt inadequate. "You're in Shadowclaw territory. I'm Alpha Lucian Ashworth." Her reaction was immediate and devastating. Terror flooded those gorgeous eyes as she tried to scramble away from him, her movements weak but desperate. "No, I won't. You can't make me." "Hey." He raised both hands in a gesture of surrender, careful to project calm rather than dominance. "Easy. No one's making you do anything." But she wasn't listening. Panic had taken hold, and she clearly saw him as just another threat to be escaped, until their eyes met, really met. The connection hit like lightning, sudden, violent, and absolutely undeniable. Every cell in Lucian's body recognized her as something essential, something he'd been searching for without realizing it. Mate. The word echoed through his consciousness with the force of divine revelation. Not just any mate, but the one. The woman his soul had been carved to fit. From her shocked gasp, she felt it too.
Chapter 7. Following the violent awakening of powers she never knew existed, Amara found herself swimming up through layers of darkness toward consciousness. Her body felt like it had been torn apart and reassembled by someone who'd forgotten the original blueprint. Every muscle ached, every bone throbbed with deep-seated pain that spoke of transformation and trauma. But underneath the physical agony lay something else. Something that hummed through her bloodstream like liquid lightning, making her fingertips tingle with unfamiliar energy. The bed beneath her was softer than anything she'd ever experienced. Silk sheets caressed skin that felt hypersensitive, as if every nerve ending had been stripped raw and exposed. The scent surrounding her was rich, masculine, and completely foreign, cedar and pine mixed with something darker, more primal. Where was she? Memories crashed back in fragmented waves. Draven's brutal grip around her throat, the failed marking that had burned like molten silver, her desperate leap through the bedroom window, 3 days of running until exhaustion claimed her. And then, rescue. "You're awake." The voice rolled over her like warm honey, deep and resonant with an authority that should have terrified her. After Draven's cruelty, any Alpha's attention should have sent her scrambling for escape routes. Instead, something inside her chest, something that felt suspiciously like Lyra, practically purred with contentment. Amara forced her eyes open, immediately regretting the decision as golden afternoon light stabbed through her skull. But once her vision adjusted, she found herself staring into the most beautiful face she'd ever seen. Golden eyes. Not the pale, predatory gray of Draven's gaze, but warm amber that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it. Strong jaw shadowed with stubble that made her wonder, stop it. She couldn't afford to be attracted to another alpha, especially not when she was lying helpless in his bed. Where am I? Her voice came out as barely a whisper, throat raw from screaming during her escape. Shadow Claw territory, he replied, settling into a chair beside the bed with fluid grace. You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days? Panic flared through her chest. Draven, he'll be looking. Let him look. The casual dismissal in his tone made her blink in surprise. No fear, no concern about facing the Blackthorn Alpha's wrath, just confidence. Who was this man? I'm Lucian Ashworth, he continued, as if reading her thoughts. Alpha of the Shadowclaw Pack. And you are... The way he asked suggested he already knew the answer. But there was something in his expression, a careful neutrality that felt like he was giving her the choice to reveal herself rather than demanding information. Amara. She didn't offer her pack name. Couldn't, because technically, she didn't have one anymore. Running from an arranged mating was tantamount to pack exile. Amara? He repeated her name like he was tasting something precious. Beautiful name for a beautiful wolf. Heat flooded her cheeks. When was the last time someone had called her beautiful without making it sound like an inventory of assets? You saw me shift, among other things. His gaze dropped to her neck where she could feel strange markings still tingling beneath the surface. What happened to you, Amara? Who tried to mark you against your will? The gentleness in his voice nearly undid her. After weeks of being treated like livestock to be traded, his basic human decency felt like a miracle. It doesn't matter, she whispered, pulling the sheets higher to hide the evidence of her ordeal. I'm no one's concern now. You're wrong about that. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. He was watching her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow felt protective. The moment I found you bleeding in my territory, you became my concern, he continued. The question is, what do you want to do about the alpha who hurt you? Nothing. The word came out sharper than intended. I just want to be left alone. Lucian nodded slowly, but she caught the flash of something dangerous in those golden eyes. Understandable. But leaving you alone might not be an option. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, he stood and moved to the window. The afternoon light caught the powerful lines of his shoulders, the confident set of his spine. Everything about him screamed alpha dominance, but somehow it didn't feel oppressive. Tell me about the markings, he said quietly. Amara's hand flew to her neck. What markings? The ones that glow when you're agitated, the ones that match the symbols carved into that dagger you were carrying. Her blood turned to ice, the veil's bane. In her panic to escape, she'd forgotten about the ancient weapon. Where is it? Safe. He turned back to face her, expression unreadable. Along with the journal pages wrapped around it. Very interesting reading, by the way. You had no right. I had every right to ensure you weren't carrying anything that posed a threat to my pack. His voice hardened slightly, reminding her that beneath the gentleness lay absolute authority. But after reading your grandfather's notes, I understand why you ran. The room felt like it was spinning. You know about the Veil bloodline? I know that you're far more than just a runaway Luna. Lucian moved closer to the bed, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. I know that what awakened in you 2 nights ago is just the beginning. And I know that Draven will tear apart half the continent to get you back. Not because he loves you, but because of what you represent. Which is? Power. The word hung between them like a loaded weapon. Ancient power that could reshape the balance between packs, the kind of power that men like Draven would kill for. Amara felt the blood drain from her face. I don't want power. I just want freedom. I know. His voice gentled again. But sometimes what we want and what we get are two very different things. Before she could respond, a sharp knock interrupted their conversation. Lucian's entire posture shifted, becoming alert and predatory in the space of a heartbeat. Alpha? The voice from beyond the door carried urgency. Border Patrol reports movement. Blackthorn forces approaching from the south. Amara's heart stopped beating. Draven had found her. Lucian's eyes met hers across the room, and in that golden gaze she saw determination that took her breath away. Then it's time to see exactly what that power of yours can do.
Chapter 8. Bonds of Fate. Despite having prepared for this moment since finding Amara bleeding in his territory, Lucian felt his chest tighten as he processed the implications of his beta's report. Draven Blackthorn wasn't known for subtlety. If he was moving forces toward Shadowclaw land, he intended to reclaim his runaway bride through violence. The woman in question had gone pale as moonlight, her jade eyes wide with terror that made Kale pace restlessly beneath Lucian's skin. His wolf wanted to comfort her, protect her, claim her as his own and damn the consequences. Which was exactly the problem. From the moment their eyes had met, he'd felt the unmistakable pull of the mate bond. Not the gentle recognition that some wolves described, but a fierce, consuming need that threatened to override every rational thought. She was his. His wolf knew it. His soul knew it. But she'd just escaped one forced mating. The last thing she needed was another alpha making demands on her freedom. "How many?" he asked Marcus through the door, forcing his voice to remain steady. 30 warriors. Maybe more. They're still 2 hours out, but they're not trying to hide their approach. A show of force, then. Draven wanted him to know exactly what he was facing if he chose to harbor the runaway Luna. "Assemble the council," Lucian commanded. "Full battle readiness, but no aggressive positioning." "Not yet." "Yes, Alpha." Footsteps retreated down the hallway, leaving him alone with Amara and the weight of a decision that would reshape both their lives. "You have to let me go." Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through him like silver. "I won't be responsible for a war between our packs." "There won't be a war." He moved back to the chair beside her bed, noting how she tracked his movements like prey watching a predator. "Because you're not going anywhere. You can't. I can. I am." The alpha authority in his voice made her flinch, and he immediately gentled his tone. "Amara, look at me." Those magnificent green eyes lifted to meet his, and he saw himself reflected in their depths, not as a threat but as something else entirely. Something that made his heart race and his wolf sing with triumph. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly. "Feel what?" But even as she spoke, color flooded her cheeks. She felt it. The connection that defied logic and demanded recognition. The bond that would reshape everything they thought they knew about their destinies. "You know what?" He leaned forward, careful not to invade her space but close enough that his scent would wrap around her like invisible chains. "Tell me you don't feel the pull." She swallowed hard, her pulse fluttering wildly at the base of her throat. "I can't. Not again. I won't be some alpha's possession." "Good." The response clearly surprised her. "Because I don't want a possession. I want a partner." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Lucian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his fingertips across the strange markings at her neck. The symbols flared with silver light at his touch, and power hummed between them like a live wire. "I know you're brave enough to run from an impossible situation, strong enough to fight 4 rogues while injured, and powerful enough to burn an alpha who tried to claim you against your will." The markings pulsed brighter, responding to his proximity in ways that made his wolf practically howl with satisfaction.
"I know you carry the blood of an ancient line," he continued, his thumb tracing the delicate curve of her jaw. "And I know that what's happening between us right now scares you more than facing Draven ever did." "It should scare you too," she whispered. Why? Because the Vale bloodline is cursed. The words tumbled out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back through sheer force of will. Every generation produces one heir with the gift, and every generation that heir destroys everything they touch. Lucian studied her face, seeing the genuine terror lurking behind her confession. Who told you that? My grandmother. Before she died, she made me promise never to awaken the power. Said it was better to be weak than to be a weapon. And yet you awakened it anyway. I didn't have a choice. The words burst out of her with enough force to make the windows rattle. Draven was going to break me. I felt the power rising and I couldn't stop it. Good. He caught her chin gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. Because from where I'm sitting, that power saved your life. Probably saved mine too. You don't understand. I understand that you've been told lies your entire life. His voice hardened with conviction. I understand that your family was so afraid of your potential that they tried to arrange a mating designed to suppress it. And I understand that you're sitting here believing you're cursed when what you really are is extraordinary. Tears gathered in her eyes, making them shimmer like jewels. You don't know what you're saying. Don't I? Lucian stood and walked to an ornate cabinet across the room. From within, he withdrew a leather-bound journal that looked older than the packhouse itself. This belonged to my grandmother. She was what humans call a seer, gifted with prophetic dreams. He returned to her side and opened the journal to a page marked with faded ribbon. She started having dreams about you 3 months ago. Dreams of silver light and ancient power. Dreams of a woman who would change everything. Amara stared at the page covered in his grandmother's spidery handwriting. Even upside down, she could make out words like mate and destiny and salvation. She told me my mate would come to me wounded and afraid. Lucian continued softly. She told me she would carry power that others would try to steal or destroy. And she told me that loving her would be the greatest challenge and greatest gift of my life. That could be anyone. No. He closed the journal and set it aside. It couldn't. Because 3 days ago, I started having the dreams myself. Dreams of green eyes and silver fire. Dreams of a woman calling for help that I was desperate to give. The bond between them pulsed with undeniable truth. Amara felt it in every cell of her body. The rightness of his touch, the completeness his presence brought to corners of her soul she hadn't known were empty. But accepting that truth meant accepting everything that came with it. If I stay, she whispered, Draven will come for me. He'll bring war to your territory. Let him come. Lucian's golden eyes blazed with protective fire. I've been alpha of this pack for 10 years. I've fought rogues, rival alphas, and challenges from within. But I've never fought for something as important as you. You barely know me. I know my wolf recognizes yours. I know my dreams led me to you. And I know that what I feel when I look at you is worth fighting for. He reached out again, this time covering her hand with his. The question is, do you think it's worth fighting for too? Before she could answer, another sharp knock echoed through the room, but this time the urgency in Marcus's voice made Lucian's blood run cold. Alpha, they're flying war banners, and there's something else. Draven's brought a witch. Chapter 9. The price of power building on the terrifying revelation that Draven had enlisted supernatural help in his pursuit. Amara felt the bottom drop out of her world. A witch. That meant blood magic, binding spells, and powers that could override even the strongest wolf's defenses. It meant she was truly trapped. What does that mean? She asked, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. Lucian's expression had shifted into something darker, more dangerous. The protective alpha who'd been offering her sanctuary was being replaced by a warrior calculating odds and strategies. It means he's not just here to negotiate, he said grimly. Witches who work with werewolf packs specialize in one thing, tracking magic and binding spells that can override supernatural defenses. The The markings on her neck began to burn, as if responding to the distant threat. Amara pressed her palm against the symbols, feeling power surge beneath her skin like a caged animal demanding release. Can she find me through these? She gestured to the glowing marks. Possibly? Lucian moved to the window, his entire body tense with barely contained aggression. The Veil bloodline is old magic, older than most witches understand. But if she's skilled enough... He didn't need to finish. They both understood the implications. I have to leave. Amara threw back the covers, ignoring the way her injuries protested the sudden movement. If I'm not here when they arrive, you'll what? Run deeper into neutral territory where even more rogues can hunt you? Lucian's voice carried a sharp edge. Or maybe head for human settlements where your wolf will slowly die from isolation? It's better than bringing war to your pack. Says who? He spun to face her, golden eyes blazing with an intensity that made her breath catch. Says the family that lied to you about your heritage? The mother who sold you to a monster? The pack that would rather see you broken than powerful? Each word hit like a physical blow, but they carried the sting of truth. Everyone who should have protected her had failed. Everyone who claimed to love her had betrayed that love for political convenience. I don't know how to be powerful, she whispered. I don't know how to control what's happening to me. Then learn. Lucian approached slowly, his movements careful and non-threatening despite the authority radiating from every line of his body. Stay. Fight. Let me help you discover what you're truly capable of. And if I hurt someone, if the power consumes me like my grandmother warned, then we'll face that together. He reached out, fingertips barely grazing her cheek in a touch so gentle it made her heart ache. But I won't let you face it alone. The mate bond hummed between them, stronger now with each moment of contact. Amara could feel his wolf calling to hers, offering protection and partnership in equal measure. For the first time since childhood, she wasn't alone. But before she could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats echoed through the valley below. They were out of time. Stay here, Lucian commanded. But there was something almost pleading in his tone. Let me handle this. No. The word surprised them both with its firmness. If this is about me, then I should face it. Amara, you said you wanted a partner, not a possession. She stood on shaking legs, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. Partners face things together. Pride flickered across his features, followed immediately by concern. You're still healing. Your power is unstable. If something goes wrong, then I'll deal with it. She moved to the window, looking down at the approaching party. Even from this distance, she could see Draven's familiar silhouette leading the charge. But I won't hide while good people suffer for my choices. Lucian studied her for a long moment, and she could practically see him weighing options. Finally, he nodded. Together, then. But you follow my lead until we understand what we're dealing with. Agreed. He moved to a wardrobe and withdrew clothing clearly meant for her. Simple but well-made garments that would allow for easy movement. Marcus thought you might need these. Amara accepted the clothes gratefully, though she couldn't help but wonder how his beta had known her size. Another question for later when they weren't facing an imminent confrontation. Turn around, she said. I've already seen. Turn around. This time her voice carried enough steel to make him blink in surprise. A slow smile spread across his features. Yes, ma'am. As she dressed quickly, Amara caught glimpses of him in the window's reflection. He kept his word, facing away from her, but something about his posture suggested he was acutely aware of every movement she made. The mate bond, she realized. It was affecting him as strongly as it affected her. Ready, she announced. When he turned back, something flared in his golden eyes that made heat pool low in her belly. The simple clothing somehow emphasized rather than hid her curves. and his gaze lingered appreciatively before snapping back to her face. "Beautiful," he murmured. "Focus, Alpha," she said, though her cheeks warmed at the compliment. "Right." He shook his head as if clearing it. "Stay close. Don't engage directly unless absolutely necessary. And whatever happens, don't let the witch touch you." "Why?" "Because physical contact makes binding spells exponentially more powerful." His expression grew grim. "And something tells me that's exactly what they're counting on." Together, they left the sanctuary of his private chambers and descended toward a confrontation that would determine not just their fate, but the fate of everyone they cared about. Behind them, the Veil's Bane dagger pulsed with its own mysterious light, as if sensing that its time was finally at hand. Chapter 10. Nightmare's Embrace. Emerging from the safety of Lucian's chambers felt like stepping into a waking nightmare. The great hall buzzed with Shadowclaw warriors preparing for battle, their movements sharp and purposeful as they checked weapons and reinforced defenses. But none of that registered once Amara saw what waited beyond the massive windows. Draven's forces had arranged themselves in perfect formation across the valley floor. Black banners snapped in the mountain wind, each one bearing the Blackthorn sigil, a silver wolf's head wreathed in thorns. Behind the warriors stood a figure that made her blood freeze, a woman draped in midnight robes, her silver hair whipping around a face marked with intricate tattoos. The witch. "She can sense you," Lucian murmured beside her, his hand settling protectively at the small of her back. "The magic recognizes magic." As if summoned by his words, the witch's head turned toward the packhouse. Even from this distance, Amara felt those ancient eyes boring into her soul, searching for weaknesses to exploit. Terror clawed at her throat. Not the clean fear of physical danger, but something deeper. A primal understanding that this woman could strip away everything that made her her. "What does she want?" "To bind your power." His voice carried grim certainty. "Make it serve Draven's will instead of your own." The markings on her neck flared with silver fire, responding to the distant magical presence like a warning bell. Pain shot through her skull as fragments of memory surfaced. Her grandmother's whispered stories about witches who could steal a wolf's very soul. "Never let them touch you, little star. Never let them speak your true name." "My grandmother," she whispered. She knew about this, about witches who hunt our kind. Lucian's golden eyes sharpened. "What did she tell you?" Before Amara could answer, the great hall's doors burst open. A young warrior stumbled inside, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. "Alpha, they've sent an emissary. He's demanding parley." "Who?" But even as Lucian asked, Amara already knew. "Alpha Draven himself, sir. He's waiting at the boundary stones." The blood drained from her face. Seeing him across a valley was one thing. Facing him directly, knowing what he intended to do. "I can't." The words escaped before she could stop them. "I can't see him again." Lyra paced frantically beneath her skin, torn between the urge to fight and the desperate need to flee. Her wolf remembered the burning agony of his failed mark, the violation of his touch. "You don't have to." Lucian's voice carried absolute conviction. "I'll handle this." "No." The refusal surprised them both. "If I hide, he wins. He gets to control the narrative, make demands while I cower like prey." Something shifted in Lucian's expression, surprise melting into admiration. "You're sure?" Instead of answering directly, Amara straightened her spine and lifted her chin. The gesture felt foreign after weeks of trying to make herself invisible, but power hummed through her veins like liquid courage. "Let's go see what my former fiancé wants." They descended through the pack house together, their footsteps echoing in corridors lined with portraits of past alphas. Each painted face seemed to watch their passage with knowing eyes, as if understanding that history was being written with every step. The main courtyard opened before them like an arena prepared for battle. Shadowclaw warriors flanked the space, their weapons gleaming in the afternoon sun. But at the center, waiting with predatory patience, stood the man who had haunted her nightmares. Draven Blackthorn looked exactly as she remembered, tall, dark, devastatingly handsome in a way that concealed the monster beneath. His pale eyes found hers across the distance, and his lips curved into that familiar smile that promised pain disguised as pleasure. "My dear Amara." His voice carried easily through the courtyard, smooth as poisoned honey. "You look different." The markings on her neck pulsed with warning heat. Different. Yes, she supposed she was. "Alpha Draven." She kept her voice level, professional. "You're trespassing." "Am I?" He gestured to the warriors surrounding him. "I'm simply retrieving stolen property." Rage flared through her chest like wildfire. "I'm not property. Aren't you?" His smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. "The blood bond says otherwise. You belong to me, little Luna. Body, soul, and that fascinating new power of yours." Beside her, Lucian's entire frame went rigid with barely contained violence. She could feel his wolf straining against his control, demanding permission to tear Draven's throat out. But this wasn't his fight, not entirely. "The bond failed," she said clearly. "Your mark burned away the moment you tried to place it. That makes me a free agent. Temporary setback." Draven's gaze shifted to Lucian with calculating interest. "Though I admit I'm curious about your protector. Tell me, Ashworth, what exactly do you hope to gain by harboring my runaway bride?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the courtyard, warriors tensed, hands moving instinctively toward weapons. This was the moment everything changed. Whatever Lucian said next would determine whether they faced war or found some other solution. But as she watched the two alphas size each other up like gladiators in an arena, one thought burned through her mind with crystal clarity. She was done being something men fought over.
Chapter 11. Lines drawn. Confronting the alpha who had tried to break his mate required every ounce of control Lucian possessed. Kyle paced beneath his skin like a caged predator, demanding blood and violence to answer the insult of another male's claim. But this was about more than territorial disputes or wounded pride. This was about Amara's freedom and her right to choose her own destiny. "What I hope to gain." Lucian kept his voice level, professional. "The satisfaction of protecting someone who asked for sanctuary." Draven's laugh held no warmth. "Sanctuary, how noble. But we both know what she really represents, don't we?" Those pale eyes glittered with malicious knowledge. He knew about the Veil bloodline, about the power that had awakened when Amara's life was threatened. "I know she's under my protection," Lucian replied carefully. "That's all that matters." "Is it?" Draven stepped closer, his movements fluid and predatory. "Tell me, have you felt it yet? The pull of that ancient magic? The way it calls to your wolf like a siren's song?" Heat flared through the mate bond, not passion, but warning. Amara was growing agitated, her power responding to the subtle threat in Draven's words. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Draven's smile turned pitying. "You think this is about love, about fate and destiny and all those romantic notions that make weaklings of strong men. But the Veil bloodline doesn't choose mates. It chooses tools." The words hit like physical blows, but Lucian forced himself to remain steady. He'd read the journal entries. He knew the history of Amara's family line. But he also knew what he felt when he looked at her, and it had nothing to do with her magical heritage. "You're wrong." "Am I?" Draven gestured toward Amara with mocking courtesy. "Ask her, Ashworth. Ask her what really awakened her power. Was it love? Or was it the desperate need for a weapon strong enough to kill me?" The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Around the courtyard, Shadowclaw warriors shifted uneasily, their confidence shaken by the implications. But it was Amara who broke the silence. "Both," she said clearly. Every head turned toward her. She stood straighter now, silver light beginning to emanate from the markings on her throat. When she spoke again, her voice carried power that made the very air shimmer. "My power awakened because I refused to be broken, because I found someone worth fighting for, and because sometimes, Draven," her green eyes blazed with inner fire. "The universe provides exactly the weapon needed to destroy monsters." The words sent electricity crackling through the courtyard. Warriors on both sides tensed, sensing the buildup of supernatural energy that preceded violence. But Draven only smiled wider. "There she is," he murmured with satisfaction, "the real Amara Vale. Not the frightened little girl who ran from her wedding, but the weapon her bloodline was meant to forge." He raised one hand and the witch emerged from behind his warriors like a shadow given form. Up close, she was even more terrifying, ancient beyond measure, with eyes that held the weight of countless dark rituals. "Seraphina," Draven said conversationally, "I believe it's time for our demonstration." The witch raised her hands, and power rolled off her in suffocating waves. Not the clean silver fire of Amara's awakening, but something darker, older, hungrier. "Stop." Amara's voice cracked like a whip. "This is between us, Draven. Leave the magic out of it." "Oh, my dear child." The witch spoke for the first time, her voice like autumn leaves rustling over graves. "Magic is never separate from anything. It's the foundation upon which all power rests." She began to chant in a language that predated human civilization. The air grew thick, oppressive, making it difficult to breathe. Around the courtyard, several younger warriors stumbled, overwhelmed by the magical pressure. But Amara didn't stumble. Instead, she stepped forward, silver light blazing from her markings like armor made of moonbeams. "You want to see what the Vale bloodline can do?" Her voice carried harmonics that resonated in Lucian's bones. "Let me show you." The power that erupted from her was nothing like the defensive burst that had burned Draven during his marking attempt. This was controlled, focused, devastatingly precise. The witch's chanting cut off abruptly as silver fire wrapped around her like chains. Her eyes widened with shock and what might have been fear. "Impossible," she breathed. "No untrained bloodline heir should be able to. I've had excellent motivation to learn quickly." Amara's smile held all the warmth of winter moonlight. "Now get off my Alpha's land before I decide to demonstrate what else I can do." My Alpha. The possessive claim sent triumph roaring through Lucian's chest. She'd chosen. Not just sanctuary, not just protection, but him. Partnership. Equals standing together against a common threat. Draven's expression had shifted from confident satisfaction to barely contained rage. "This isn't over, little Luna. The blood bond still ties our packs together. You can't run from that." "Watch me," Amara replied. But as the Blackthorn forces began their withdrawal, Lucian caught the calculating look that passed between Draven and his witch. They weren't retreating, they were regrouping. Whatever came next would be far more dangerous than a simple territorial dispute, because now they knew exactly what they were dealing with, and they were going to come prepared.
Chapter 12. Bonds of Silver and Soul. Following the confrontation that left her drained but oddly exhilarated, Amara found herself back in Lucian's chambers as night settled over the valley. The events of the afternoon felt surreal. Had she really stood toe-to-toe with a centuries-old witch and emerged victorious? The silver markings on her neck still hummed with residual power, casting faint shadows on the walls as she moved. Each pulse reminded her that she was no longer the frightened girl who'd fled her wedding. Something fundamental had shifted during that battle of wills. "You were magnificent," Lucian said from where he stood by the fireplace, his golden eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "I was terrified." The admission came easier than expected. "I had no idea if what I was doing would work, or if I'd accidentally incinerate everyone in the courtyard. But you did it anyway." He moved closer, his presence both comforting and electric. "That's what courage looks like. Not the absence of fear, but action despite it. The mate bond pulsed between them, stronger now after their shared confrontation with Draven. She could feel Lucian's wolf just beneath the surface, protective and proud and utterly devoted to her well-being. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we prepare for what comes next." His expression grew serious. Draven won't give up. He'll regroup, plan a different approach, probably try to exploit the blood bond he mentioned. What exactly is a blood bond? My mother arranged the engagement, but she never explained the magical implications. Lucian's jaw tightened. It's old magic, binding two packs together through mystical ties that can't be easily broken. If Draven really completed the ritual, then what? Then our packs are magically connected whether we want it or not. He could use that connection to track you, influence your power, even force compliance through supernatural means. Terror crept up her spine like ice water. Can it be broken? Theoretically. He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. But it would require either the death of one of the bound parties or a counter-ritual powerful enough to sever the mystical connection. And you know how to perform this counter-ritual? No. The admission clearly cost him. That kind of magic is beyond my knowledge. We'd need someone with extensive experience in bloodline magic and pack bonds. Amara sank into a chair by the fire, suddenly exhausted. Every solution seemed to lead to more problems, more dangers she wasn't equipped to handle. "Hey." Lucian knelt beside her chair, his hands covering hers with gentle warmth. "We'll figure this out. Together." The simple touch sent heat spiraling through her system. Not just physical attraction, though that was certainly present, but something deeper. The rightness of his presence. The way her soul seemed to recognize his as its missing piece. "Together," she repeated softly. "Together." His thumb traced over her knuckles, sending shivers up her arm. "Amara, there's something else we need to discuss." "What?" "The mate bond." His golden eyes held hers steadily. "I know you felt it during the confrontation. The way your power amplified when you claimed me as your alpha." Heat flooded her cheeks. She had said that, hadn't she? My alpha. The possessive claim had felt as natural as breathing. "I didn't mean to presume." "You didn't presume anything." His voice dropped to that low rumble that made her wolf purr. "You stated a truth we've both been dancing around since the moment we met. Which is that we're mates." He leaned closer, his scent wrapping around her like a physical caress. "Not because of prophecy or bloodline magic or political necessity, because we choose to be." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility and promise. Amara felt her heart racing, her skin hyper-aware of every point where their bodies almost touched. "Lucian." "I know you're afraid," he murmured. "After what Draven tried to do, trusting another alpha must feel impossible. But I need you to know, I will never force you into anything. The choice is always yours." Choice. The word resonated through her chest like a bell. When was the last time anyone had offered her a real choice about her own life? "What if I choose you?" The question emerged as barely a whisper. "What if I want this bond, but I'm terrified of what it might cost?" "Then we take it one day at a time." His hands framed her face with infinite gentleness. "No pressure, no expectations beyond what we both want to give. And if my power becomes dangerous, if the Veil bloodline tries to consume me like my grandmother warned, then I'll be right beside you, helping you stay anchored to who you really are." His golden eyes blazed with conviction. "You're not your bloodline, Amara. You're not a weapon or a tool or a political asset. You're a woman who deserves to be loved for exactly who she is." Loved. The word sent lightning through her system. "Is that what this is?" she asked breathlessly. "Love?" "Yes." No hesitation. No doubt. "I love your courage, your compassion, the way you refuse to be broken no matter what life throws at you. I love how you make my wolf sing with joy and my human heart race with possibility. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief so profound it felt like drowning in starlight. I love you too, she whispered. The confession hung between them for a heartbeat, before Lucian closed the distance, his lips finding hers in a kiss that tasted like coming home. Chapter 13. Ancient Secrets. Despite the warmth of Lucian's embrace still lingering on her skin, Amara found herself drawn to the Veil's Bane dagger resting on the nightstand. Something about their love confession had awakened a deeper connection to the ancient weapon. She could feel it calling to her now, humming with recognition. There's something I need to show you, she whispered against his chest, reluctant to break the perfect moment, but knowing secrets could no longer hide between them. Lucian's arms tightened briefly before releasing her. What is it? She reached for the dagger, unwrapping it with careful reverence. But as her fingers touched the blade, something extraordinary happened. The weapon pulsed with silver fire, and suddenly the air around them shimmered like heat waves. Blessed moon, Lucian breathed. Because hovering in the space above the dagger, translucent but unmistakably real, was the figure of an elderly man. His eyes held the same jade green as Amara's, and power radiated from him like sunlight through crystal. Grandfather? She whispered. The spirit smiled, his form solidifying slightly. Hello, little star. I wondered when you would finally hear my call. This is impossible, Lucian said, though his voice held wonder rather than disbelief. Nothing is impossible for the Veil bloodline, her grandfather replied. We are guardians, Amara, protectors of ancient knowledge and keepers of balance between the supernatural worlds. You said I was cursed, that the power would destroy everything. I said it could destroy everything if misused. His expression grew stern. But you, my dear child, were always meant for something greater. The dagger chose you because it recognizes what you truly are. Which is the Veil's aegis. The words resonated with power that made the windows rattle. A living shield capable of protecting not just your mate, but all who seek sanctuary under your banner. Lucian stepped closer, his golden eyes reflecting the supernatural light. Aegis. That's what the journal mentioned. A power that awakens only when its bearer finds their true mate. Precisely. Her grandfather's gaze shifted between them with approval. The bond you've forged isn't just romantic. It's mystical. Together, you can channel power that hasn't been seen for centuries. Together? Amara felt her heart racing. What do you mean? Show him your true markings, child. Confused but trusting, Amara pulled aside the collar of her shirt. The silver symbols flared brighter, but now she could see what had been hidden before. The markings didn't end at her neck. They traced down her collarbone, across her shoulder, forming an intricate pattern that resembled wings, Lucian whispered, his fingers hovering just above the glowing designs. They look like wings. The wings of protection, her grandfather confirmed. And when you touch them, Alpha Ashworth, you'll complete the circuit that makes both of you stronger than any Force Draven can bring against you. Grandfather, there's something else. Amara's voice carried urgency. Draven mentioned a blood bond. He says it ties our packs together, that he can use it to control me. The spirit's expression darkened. Ah, I feared this might happen. Your mother's desperation made her vulnerable to old magic she didn't understand. Can it be broken? Yes, but the ritual requires... He paused, studying their faces carefully. It requires you to claim your full power, to accept not just your bloodline gifts, but your role as protector of all wolves who cannot protect themselves. I don't understand. The blood bond can only be severed by power greater than the magic that created it. You must become what you were always meant to be, little star. Not just a Luna, but something far more significant. Before she could ask what he meant, a howl echoed across the valley, long, mournful, and filled with rage. It was followed by another, then another. "They're coming," Lucian said grimly. "Draven's forces. They're moving under cover of darkness." Her grandfather's image began to fade. "Remember, child, together you are stronger than apart. Trust in your bond. Trust in your power. And most importantly..." His voice grew distant as his form dissolved. "Trust in love. It's the only force in any realm that can never be conquered." The dagger pulsed once more before going dormant, leaving them alone with the weight of revelation and the sound of approaching war. "Are you ready for this?" Lucian asked softly. Amara looked at the man who'd become her anchor, her strength, her reason for fighting. Then she looked at the weapon that had chosen her to be something greater than she'd ever imagined. "No," she said honestly, "but that's never stopped me before." Outside, the howls grew closer. Inside, two souls prepared to discover just how powerful love could truly be.
Chapter 14. Betrayal's Sting. Meanwhile, as Amara processed her grandfather's revelations, Lucian found his attention drawn to movement in the courtyard below. His enhanced vision caught what human eyes would miss, a figure moving through the shadows with suspicious stealth. "Stay here," he murmured, pressing a quick kiss to Amara's temple. "I need to check something." "Lucian, I'll be right back. I promise." He slipped from the room, every instinct screaming danger. The figure below moved with the fluid grace of a Shadowclaw warrior, but something felt wrong. Off. Lucian descended through the pack house silently, his wolf-enhanced senses tracking the intruder's scent. Pine and earth and something else. Something that made his blood run cold. Blackthorn territory markers. Whoever this was had been in enemy lands recently. He followed the trail to his private study, where a lone figure stood examining the maps scattered across his desk. In the moonlight streaming through the windows, Lucian recognized the familiar silhouette. Valerius. His beta's name came out flat, emotionless. The man turned, his usually loyal expression replaced by something harder, colder. "Alpha. Explain." "There's nothing to explain." Valerius straightened, no longer bothering to hide his true allegiances. "I serve the stronger Alpha. Always have." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Valerius had been his second in command for 3 years, trusted with pack secrets, battle strategies, the safety of everyone under Lucian's protection. "How long?" The question came out as a growl. "Since the beginning. No remorse, no shame. Draven recruited me before you ever took the Alpha position. I've been feeding him information about Shadowclaw weaknesses for years. And tonight? Tonight I complete my mission." Valerius pulled a small vial from his pocket, dark liquid that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Witch's brew. 1 drop in your mate's tea, and her power becomes mine to control." Rage exploded through Lucian's chest like wildfire. His wolf clawed for release, demanding blood and vengeance for the threat to their mate. "You'll never get near her." "Won't I?" Valerius smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. "I'm your most trusted warrior, Lucian. She'll never suspect me." "She doesn't have to." Lucian's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "Because you're not leaving this room alive." The attack came without warning. Valerius lunged forward, enhanced speed making him blur with motion. But Lucian was ready. Years of combat experience kicked in, muscle memory guiding his responses. They crashed into the desk, sending maps and documents flying. Valerius fought like a man possessed, fueled by desperation and supernatural enhancement. The dark liquid from the vial had spilled across his hands during the struggle, and wherever it touched, his strength seemed to double. "You can't win, Lucian," Valerius snarled as they grappled. "Draven has allies you can't imagine, power you can't comprehend. Then why does he need a betrayer to do his dirty work?" The question hit home. Valerius's concentration wavered just long enough for Lucian to gain the advantage. A powerful blow sent the traitor crashing into the bookshelf, ancient volumes tumbling around him. But as Valerius struggled to rise, His hand closed around something that made Lucian's blood freeze. A communication stone, already glowing with activated magic. Too late, the beta gasped, blood trickling from his mouth. They know about the Aegis awakening. They know about your mate's true power. Before Lucian could stop him, Valerius spoke a single word in the old tongue, a trigger phrase that would send everything he'd witnessed directly to Draven's witch. And now... Valerius smiled as life faded from his eyes. Now they know exactly how to break her. The communication stone cracked, its magic spent. In the sudden silence, Lucian could hear only his own thundering heartbeat and the distant sound of howls growing ever closer. He'd won the battle but potentially lost the war. Because somewhere in the darkness, Draven now possessed the knowledge he needed to turn Amara's greatest strength into her most devastating weakness.
Chapter 15. The darkness gathers. Simultaneously, back in Lucian's chambers, Amara felt the exact moment something went wrong. The mate bond that had been humming with contentment suddenly spiked with violence and betrayal, sending her wolf into a frenzy of protective instincts. "Lucian!" she called out, but only silence answered. The markings on her skin flared to life, responding to her distress. Silver light painted the walls as she moved toward the door, every instinct screaming that her mate was in danger. But before she could leave the room, a figure materialized from the shadows near the window. Not Lucian, not one of his warriors. A woman with silver hair and eyes like ancient ice. Seraphina, Draven's witch. "Hello, little Aegis," the sorceress purred. "I thought it was time we had a proper conversation." Terror shot through Amara's system, but she forced herself to stand tall. "How did you get past the defenses?" "Magic has ways of circumventing even the strongest barriers." Seraphina stepped closer, power radiating from her like cold fire. "Especially when one has inside knowledge." The implications hit like a sledgehammer. Someone in the pack was working with the enemy. "Who?" Amara demanded. "Does it matter? What matters is that I now understand exactly what you are, what you're capable of, and most importantly..." The witch's smile turned predatory. "How to use that power for my own purposes. You can't force me to..." "Can't I?" Seraphina raised one hand, and suddenly the air grew thick, oppressive. Magic pressed against Amara from all sides, seeking entry points in her defenses. "The Veil bloodline may be powerful, child, but it's also predictable. Always has been." Silver light blazed from Amara's markings as she fought back, but something was wrong. The witch's magic felt familiar somehow, as if it recognized the patterns of her power. "You're wondering why your defenses feel compromised," Seraphina observed with clinical interest. "It's because I've had centuries to study your family line, to understand its strengths." The pressure increased, making it hard to breathe. "And its weaknesses." Suddenly, Amara's power flickered. The steady silver light wavered like a candle in a hurricane, and fear flooded through her system. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Her grandfather had said the Aegis was unbreakable. "You see, little one, every great power has a flaw. The Veil bloodline's flaw is love." The witch's voice carried cruel satisfaction. "The stronger your emotional bonds, the more vulnerable you become to having those bonds turned against you." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering directly, Seraphina gestured toward the window. In the courtyard below, Lucian appeared. But he wasn't alone. Draven held a blade to his throat, the silver metal gleaming with malevolent purpose. "Choose," the witch commanded. "Submit to my control willingly, and your mate lives. Resist, and watch him die slowly while I tear his essence from his body piece by piece." Amara's world narrowed to that single image. Lucian, proud and strong, and utterly at the mercy of a monster who would destroy him without hesitation. The mate bond pulsed with his pain, his determination to protect her even if it cost his life. She could feel his love wrapping around her heart like armor, giving her strength even in this darkest moment. But it also gave her clarity. "You made one mistake," she said quietly. "And what's that?" "You assumed love was a weakness." Silver fire erupted from her markings, brighter than before. Not flickering now, but blazing with the fury of a woman who would burn down the world to protect what mattered most. "But love isn't vulnerability, it's power, the most dangerous kind." The witch's confident expression wavered. "Impossible. I severed your connection to him? No." Amara stepped forward, power crackling around her like lightning given form. "You severed my doubt, my fear, the only things that were actually holding me back." And as silver light filled the room like captured starlight, Amara finally understood what her grandfather had been trying to tell her. The Aegis wasn't just a shield, it was a sword, and it was time to remind the world exactly what happened to those who threatened the people she loved. Chapter 16. Silver Fire and Blood Building. On the terrifying realization that her power was both weapon and target, Amara burst from the pack house like silver lightning given form. The courtyard erupted into chaos around her, Shadowclaw warriors clashing with Blackthorn forces under a moon that seemed to bleed crimson light. But her focus narrowed to one sight that stopped her heart cold. Lucian, on his knees, Draven's blade pressed against his throat. "Let him go!" Her voice carried power that shattered windows, sent warriors stumbling. Draven's pale eyes found hers across the battlefield. There she is, the little Aegis who thinks love makes her strong. Silver fire blazed from her markings as she stepped forward. "It does. Does it?" His blade drew a thin line of blood across Lucian's neck. "Then prove it. Submit to my will, and he lives. Resist." The threat hung in the air like poison. Around them, the battle paused, warriors from both sides recognizing that this moment would determine everything. "Don't do it," Lucian gasped, his golden eyes fierce despite the blade at his throat. "Whatever he wants, don't—" Draven's grip tightened, cutting off his words. "Choose quickly, little Luna. My patience wears thin." Amara felt the weight of every gaze, every hope, every fear crushing down on her shoulders. The Veil's bane dagger hummed at her hip, hungry for blood. Her power surged through her veins like molten silver. But as she raised her hands to surrender, something went catastrophically wrong. The witch Seraphina stepped from the shadows behind Lucian, her ancient magic wrapping around him like chains of darkness. "Foolish child, did you think we came unprepared?" Dark energy poured from the sorceress, not aimed at Amara, but at the mate bond itself. The connection between them, that beautiful, unbreakable link, began to fray under the assault. "No!" Amara lunged forward, but invisible barriers slammed into her, holding her back. She could only watch in horror as the bond that had given her strength, purpose, love itself started to dissolve. Lucian's face went pale as the magical connection between them was severed strand by strand. "You see?" Draven's voice carried cruel satisfaction. "Power without understanding is just chaos waiting to happen. Your bloodline gifts mean nothing without the knowledge to wield them," the mate bond snapped. The pain was indescribable, like having her soul torn from her body. Amara collapsed to her knees, silver fire flickering and dying as the source of her strength was cut away. "Lucian?" His name emerged as barely a whisper. But when she looked up, his golden eyes held no recognition, no love, no memory of what they'd shared. The witch had stolen more than their bond. She'd stolen his very knowledge of her. "Who are you?" he asked, confusion clear in his voice. And with those 3 words, Amara's world shattered completely.
Chapter 17. Memories in Ash. Meanwhile, Lucian stared at the woman kneeling in the courtyard and felt nothing. She was beautiful, clearly powerful, obviously in pain, but when he searched his mind for any memory of her, He found only empty spaces where something important should have been. "I don't understand," he said slowly. "What's happening to me?" The witch beside him, when had she arrived, smiled with cold satisfaction. "Nothing permanent, Alpha Ashworth. Simply a temporary cleansing of unwanted influences." Unwanted influences? The spell this veil air cast on you. The false bonds she created to make you believe you loved her. The sorceress gestured dismissively toward the silver-haired woman. "All romantic enchantments designed to control your mind and steal your pack's loyalty." That made sense, didn't it? The hollow ache in his chest. The feeling that something crucial was missing. Those could be side effects of magical manipulation being removed. But why did looking at her feel like staring into the sun? Why did every instinct scream that something was wrong with this explanation? "You're lying," the woman, what was her name, whispered. "Lucian, please. You know me. You love me." "I don't know you at all," he replied, though the words felt like broken glass in his throat. "Yes, you do." She struggled to her feet, silver light flickering weakly around her. "We're mates, bonded. You felt it the moment we met." "Enough." Alpha Draven stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Ashworth, this woman has been using Veil bloodline magic to manipulate your thoughts for weeks. Everything you think you feel for her is artificial." Lucian studied the stranger's face, searching for any spark of recognition. Her jade-green eyes held desperate hope, but that proved nothing. Any skilled manipulator could fake emotion. Still, something felt wrong, missing, like a song with crucial notes removed. "If she was controlling me," he said carefully, "why do I feel like I've lost something important?" "Because she was skilled," the witch replied smoothly. "The best enchantments leave their victims feeling incomplete when broken. It passes." The explanation satisfied his logical mind, but his wolf paced restlessly beneath his skin. Kyle whined and scratched, clearly agitated about something he couldn't identify. "The question now," Draven continued, "is what we do with her. The Veil bloodline is dangerous when uncontrolled. She's already proven she'll use her power to manipulate and deceive." "I never," the woman started. "Silence." Power rolled off Draven in suffocating waves. "You've done enough damage with your lies." Lucian watched her flinch under the Alpha command, and something twisted in his gut. Wrong. This felt wrong. But before he could examine that feeling further, warriors in black surrounded the woman. Not his warriors. He could tell that much from their scents. Foreign wolves with hostile intent. "Wait," he said. "What are you doing?" "Taking her back where she belongs," Draven replied. "Don't concern yourself, Ashworth. Without her magical influence clouding your judgment, you'll see this was all for the best." They lifted her from the ground, and she looked directly at him one final time. Those green eyes held such devastating sadness that his chest physically ached. "I forgive you," she whispered, "because I know this isn't really you." Then they dragged her away, and with her went the last fragment of something Lucian couldn't name but desperately wanted back.
Chapter 18. Caged Lightning. Consequently, Amara found herself chained in what had once been a wine cellar, silver manacles burning against her wrists. The metal was old, carved with runes that suppressed supernatural abilities. Every breath felt like inhaling ground glass, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the gaping wound where her mate bond used to be. "Comfortable?" Draven's voice drifted down from the cellar entrance. She didn't bother responding. What was the point? He'd won. Torn away everything that mattered and left her with nothing but empty spaces where love used to live. "I must admit," he continued, descending the stone steps, "Seraphina's work exceeded my expectations. Not only did we break your connection to Ashworth, we convinced him you were the villain. Quite elegant, really." "Why?" The words scraped out of her raw throat. "You have me. Isn't that enough?" Oh, my dear child, having you was never the goal. He crouched beside her, close enough that his scent made her wolf recoil in revulsion. Breaking you was. I'm already broken. Are you? His pale eyes glittered with malicious interest. Let's find out. He gestured, and the witch materialized from the shadows like smoke given form. In her hands, she carried a silver chalice filled with liquid that seemed to absorb light. The final step, Seraphina explained with clinical detachment. This potion will bind your power to Draven's will permanently. You'll become a weapon he can aim at any target. And if I refuse? Then we visit Alpha Ashworth again, Draven said softly. This time, instead of simply removing his memories, we remove his life. Slowly, painfully, while you watch. The threat hit like a physical blow. Even if Lucian didn't remember her, even if he thought she was his enemy, she couldn't let him die. Not because of her. I need time to think. No. Draven's voice cut through her plea like a blade. You choose now. Submit willingly, or watch your former mate suffer for your defiance. Tears burned behind her eyelids, but she refused to let them fall. She'd lost everything, love, freedom, hope itself, but she wouldn't lose her dignity. There is one other option, Seraphina said thoughtfully. Draven frowned. What option? The girl could die. If her heart stops, the power dies with her. No weapon for anyone. The witch tilted her head with academic curiosity. Of course, that would waste considerable effort on our part. True, Draven mused. But if she's going to be stubborn about this... They were discussing her death like a business transaction. Part of Amara wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Part of her wanted to weep. But deep in her chest, beneath the pain and despair, something else stirred. Something that had been waiting for this exact moment of absolute darkness. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. The Aegis doesn't just protect Little Star. Sometimes, it strikes back. I have an answer, she said quietly. And? Amara lifted her head, meeting Draven's pale gaze with newfound steel. I choose option 3. Before either of them could react, silver fire exploded from her markings with enough force to shatter the suppression manacles. The runes carved into the metal screamed as ancient magic overwhelmed their restraints. She rose to her feet like a goddess of vengeance wrapped in starlight, power blazing around her in waves that made the very air shimmer. You forgot something important, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in their bones. The Veil bloodline doesn't break, it bends, and when it snaps back... The cellar walls began to crack under the pressure of her unleashed power. Everything in its path gets destroyed. Chapter 19, Awakened Fury. Rising from the rubble of her shattered prison, Amara felt power coursing through her veins like liquid starlight. The silver markings across her skin blazed with intensity that made the cellar walls crack and groan under supernatural pressure. Impossible? Seraphina breathed, her ancient eyes wide with something that might have been fear. The suppression runes should have... Your runes were designed for ordinary magic. Amara's voice carried harmonics that resonated through stone and bone alike. I am not ordinary, Draven snarled, his form beginning to shift as bones elongated and muscles expanded. Then we'll do this the old way. Claw and fang. By all means. She smiled, and it held all the warmth of winter moonlight. Let's dance. The Alpha lunged at her with inhuman speed, claws extended for her throat. But Amara was no longer the frightened girl who'd fled her wedding. She was something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and power enough to reshape reality. Silver fire erupted from her hands, meeting his attack with force that sent him crashing through the cellar wall. Stones and mortar exploded outward as the ancient structure buckled under their clash. You want to see what the Veil bloodline can truly do? She called out as she stepped through the hole his body had created. Let me show you what happens when you threaten everything I love. Above them, the packhouse courtyard had descended into total chaos. Shadowclaw and Blackthorn warriors battled with primal fury, while supernatural energies crackled through the air like trapped lightning. But Amara's attention focused on one figure standing apart from the melee, Lucian, his golden eyes confused and empty where they should have held recognition. The sight of him not knowing her nearly brought her to her knees. But grief was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when his life hung in the balance. Ashworth, Draven's voice boomed across the battlefield as he emerged from the ruined cellar, his partially shifted form covered in blood and dust. Kill the witch! She's using mind magic to confuse you! Lucian's head turned toward her, those beloved features twisted with uncertainty and suspicion. When he began walking in her direction, she felt something crack inside her chest. "No," she whispered. "Please, no." "I'm sorry," he said when he reached her, and the gentleness in his voice made it so much worse. "I don't know who you are, but I won't let you hurt my pack." His hand closed around her throat, not with Draven's brutal force, but with the careful control of someone who took no pleasure in violence, someone who would make it quick and clean because he thought it was justice. Lucian. His name escaped her lips like a prayer. "I love you. Please remember. Please." For just a moment, his grip loosened. Something flickered behind those golden eyes, confusion, recognition, desperate hope. I feel like I should know you," he murmured. "You do know me." Tears traced silver paths down her cheeks. "We're mates, bonded. Your wolf knows mine even if the witch stole your memories." His hand fell away from her throat as if burned. "My wolf is agitated, upset about something I can't identify. Because part of you remembers." She stepped closer, silver light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Part of you knows that losing me would destroy everything good in your world." "Enough!" Seraphina's shriek cut through their moment like a blade. "The spell will hold. It must." But even as the witch spoke, cracks appeared in her magical working. Bonds forged by love weren't easily broken, and the mate connection between Amara and Lucian had been strengthened by shared danger, mutual sacrifice, and absolute trust. "Fight it," Amara urged him. "Remember what we mean to each other." Lucian's eyes blazed brighter, and suddenly she felt it, a tremor along the severed bond. Faint, but unmistakable. He was starting to remember.
Chapter 20. Fragments of Truth. Following the strange woman's desperate plea, Lucian felt his world tilting on its axis. Everything the witch had told him about magical manipulation and false bonds began to crumble under the weight of sensation flooding back. Her scent, cedar and moonlight, and something uniquely her that made his wolf howl with recognition. Her voice. How had he forgotten that melody? The way she said his name like it was sacred? Her touch. When she'd reached for him, every cell in his body had sung with rightness. "This isn't possible," he said. But doubt crept into his voice. "Isn't it?" She stepped closer, silver light dancing across her skin like captured starlight. "Look at me, Lucian. Really look. Tell me you don't feel the pull." He did feel it, a magnetic force that drew him to her despite every logical argument his mind could construct. His wolf paced frantically, desperate to close the distance between them. "The witch said you were manipulating me." "The witch," she replied with bitter laugh, "lied to you about everything." Around them, the battle raged on, but Lucian found himself unable to focus on anything except those jade-green eyes that held such devastating love that looking into them felt like drowning in warm honey. "Prove it," he whispered. Instead of arguing further, she reached for the dagger at her hip. The blade seemed to drink in moonlight as she drew it, ancient symbols along its length blazing with power. "This is the Veil's bane," she said, "a weapon forged by my bloodline to protect those we love. It chose me the night I fled from Draven's forced mating." The name hit him like lightning. Draven. Images flashed through his mind, A confrontation in the courtyard, threats against someone precious, the desperate need to protect. You ran from a wedding, he said slowly, pieces clicking into place. I ran to you. Her voice broke on the words. I found sanctuary in your arms, found love I never thought possible. More memories surfaced. A silver-gray wolf bleeding in his territory, carrying her to safety. The first moment their eyes met and the world shifted around them. Amara, he breathed. Her name on his lips shattered the last of the witch's hold. The mate bond snapped back into place with enough force to drive him to his knees. Every emotion he'd lost flooding back in a tidal wave of sensation. Love. Fierce and consuming and absolutely unbreakable. Amara. He surged to his feet, reaching for her just as Draven's roar of rage split the night. Kill them both, the Alpha commanded his warriors. Now! But as Blackthorn forces closed in around them, something extraordinary happened. The bond between Lucian and Amara didn't just restore their connection, it amplified it. Her power flowed into him while his strength anchored her abilities, creating something neither could achieve alone. Together? She asked, silver fire blazing around them both. Always, he replied, feeling his own magic awaken in response to hers. The combined force of their united power erupted outward like a supernova. Warriors from both sides stumbled backward, temporarily blinded by the brilliant display. In that moment of stunned silence, Lucian and Amara stood at the center of their own personal storm, finally whole again. Draven wants a war. Amara's voice carried deadly promise. Let's give him one he'll never forget.
Chapter 21, United. We stand subsequently with their bond restored and power flowing between them like electricity through conductor wire. Amara felt invincible. The hollow ache that had consumed her since the witch's attack was gone, replaced by strength that seemed to have no limits. Ready? Lucian asked, his golden eyes blazing with love and determination. Born ready, she replied. They moved as one, two halves of a whole functioning with perfect synchronization. Where Draven's warriors attacked with brute force, they responded with precision and devastating efficiency. Amara's silver fire swept across the battlefield in controlled arcs, never striking their allies but finding every enemy with unerring accuracy. Beside her, Lucian fought with enhanced speed and strength, the mate bond amplifying his natural abilities beyond anything he'd possessed before. Impossible! Seraphina shrieked from somewhere behind enemy lines. The binding should have held. You underestimated love, Amara called back, her voice carrying easily across the chaos. It's stronger than any magic you could conjure. The witch's response was a wave of dark energy aimed directly at her heart, but before it could strike, Lucian stepped into its path, his body blazing with protective power that turned the attack aside like water off stone. My turn, he growled. Golden light erupted from his hands, not the silver fire of her bloodline, but something uniquely his own. Alpha power enhanced by their bond and focused through love into something far more dangerous than simple dominance. The blast caught Seraphina full in the chest, sending her flying backward to crash into a stone wall with bone-breaking force. One down, Amara murmured with satisfaction. But their victory celebration was cut short as Draven himself entered the fray. No longer merely alpha-enhanced, he'd drunk something that made his eyes glow with unnatural fire and his movements blur with inhuman speed. You want to play with magic? He snarled. Let me show you what real power looks like. The potion he'd consumed, whatever dark substance Seraphina had brewed, turned him into something monstrous. Claws like silver knives, fangs that dripped with poison, strength that cracked stone with every step. Stay back, Lucian commanded, moving to intercept the enhanced alpha. Like hell. Amara stepped up beside him, the veil's bane singing in her grip. We end this together, or not at all. Draven's laugh held no humor. How romantic. You can die together, too. He attacked with berserker fury, enhanced speed making him nearly impossible to track. But Amara and Lucian moved as one entity, their bond allowing them to anticipate each other's actions perfectly. Where one defended, the other struck. Where one created an opening, the other exploited it ruthlessly. Still, Draven's artificial enhancement made him far stronger than any normal alpha. For every hit they landed, he delivered 2 in return. Blood flowed freely from wounds that would have killed ordinary wolves. Getting tired? He taunted between devastating attacks. Hardly, Amara replied, though her breathing had grown labored. The truth was, maintaining their enhanced connection was draining. The bond that made them stronger also shared the burden of power between them. They were burning through energy reserves at an unsustainable rate. "We need to end this," Lucian said through gritted teeth. "Now." Amara looked at the ancient dagger in her hands, then at the man she loved more than life itself. An idea formed. Desperate, dangerous, but potentially decisive. "Trust me?" she asked. "With everything." She smiled, and in that expression lay all the love, hope, and determination that had carried them through every trial. "Then let's show him what the Vale bloodline was really meant to do." The dagger blazed with silver fire as she raised it high, its ancient magic calling to power that had slept for generations. But this time, she wouldn't face it alone. This time, she had love to guide her
Chapter
aim. 22. Heart of Silverfire. Channeling power through the Vale's bane while maintaining her bond with Lucian required perfect synchronization between heart, mind, and soul. The ancient dagger hummed with recognition as she raised it high, silver fire cascading down its length like liquid starlight. "Together," she whispered, feeling Lucian's strength flow into her through their restored connection. "Always," he replied, his golden eyes blazing with absolute trust. The dagger struck downward just as Draven lunged for her throat. But instead of meeting flesh, the blade pierced something far more vital, the magical enhancement that had turned him into a monster. Silver fire erupted through his system, burning away Seraphina's dark magic like sunlight destroying shadows. Draven's inhuman speed faltered, his poison fangs retracted. The unnatural glow faded from his eyes, leaving behind only a broken alpha who'd lost everything in his quest for power. "Impossible," he gasped, falling to his knees. "The potion, it was supposed to make me invincible." "Nothing is invincible against love," Amara said softly. "That's what you never understood." Around them, the battlefield had gone silent. Shadowclaw and Blackthorn warriors alike stared in stunned amazement as their respective alphas faced each other in the aftermath of supernatural combat. "It's over, Draven." Lucian stepped forward, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Surrender now, and your people can return home safely." "My people?" Draven's laugh held no humor. "They follow strength, Ashworth. When word spreads that I was defeated by a runaway Luna and her mate, half of them will abandon the pack before dawn." Amara felt a flicker of something unexpected. Pity. Draven had been so focused on power and control that he'd never learned what real strength looked like. He'd never experienced the kind of love that made you stronger instead of weaker. "Then maybe it's time for new leadership," she said quietly. "You mean to kill me?" It wasn't a question. "No." Her response surprised everyone, including herself. "I mean to give you a choice. Genuine surrender. Acknowledgement that your claim on me was invalid, that the blood bond between our packs is dissolved, in exchange for your life." Lucian's head snapped toward her. "Amara, he's beaten," she continued, not taking her eyes off Draven. "Making him a martyr won't help anyone." For a long moment, the only sound was wind rustling through broken stone and scattered leaves. Then Draven raised his head, meeting her gaze with something that might have been respect. "You would show mercy to the man who tried to break you? I would show mercy to someone who's already broken himself." Another silence stretched between them, heavy with implications that would reshape pack politics across the Northern Territories. Finally, Draven lowered his head in the traditional gesture of submission. I acknowledge defeat. The blood bond is dissolved. Amara Vale is no longer bound to my pack or my will. The words carried magical weight. Ancient power recognizing the formal dissolution of mystical ties. Amara felt something lift from her shoulders, a burden she hadn't fully realized she'd been carrying. "Thank you," she said simply. "Don't thank me yet." Draven struggled to his feet, exhaustion clear in every line of his body. There are others who won't accept this outcome. Alphas who've been waiting for any sign of weakness to make their own moves for power. "Let them come," Lucian said, moving to stand beside Amara. "We'll face whatever comes together." As the first rays of dawn broke over the valley, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Amara realized that this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. A beginning of the life she'd fought so hard.
Chapter 23. Bonds Reforged. Standing in the aftermath of battle with Amara's hand in his, Lucian felt the rightness of their victory settling into his bones. The mate bond hummed between them, stronger now for having been tested and restored, deeper for having survived the ultimate challenge. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now we build something new." He lifted their joined hands, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. A pack alliance based on choice instead of coercion, a bond between equals. Around them, the cleanup had already begun. Marcus directed Shadowclaw warriors intending to the wounded while Blackthorn forces gathered their fallen under the watchful eye of their defeated Alpha. But it was another arrival that caught Lucian's attention, a familiar silver-haired figure stepping carefully through the courtyard rubble. "Luna Selene," he said formally. Amara tensed beside him, her entire body going rigid with remembered pain. "Mother." The older woman approached slowly, her regal composure cracked with something that looked suspiciously like remorse. When she reached them, she did something that shocked everyone present. She knelt. "Forgive me," Selene whispered, her voice breaking on the words. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought sacrificing your happiness was the only way to save our pack." "Mother, get up." Amara's voice carried exhaustion rather than anger. "We need to talk, but not here. Not like this." Selene rose gracefully, but her eyes remained fixed on her daughter's face. "The blood bond that forced your engagement, I never wanted that. Draven cornered me into it, threatened to destroy everything if I refused. So you gave him me instead. I gave him what I thought was a political arrangement that could be managed." Selene's composure cracked further. "I didn't understand about your bloodline gifts. I didn't know he intended to break you to access them." Lucian felt Amara's internal struggle through their bond, the desire to forgive warring with legitimate anger and hurt. But underneath it all, he sensed her fundamental nature reasserting itself. She was a protector, a healer, holding grudges when against everything she truly was. "We'll work through it," Amara said finally. "But things can't go back to how they were. I'm not the same person who fled from her wedding." "No," Selene agreed, something like pride flickering in her eyes. "You're stronger. Better. Everything I hoped you could become but was too afraid to let you try." "Alpha?" Marcus approached with a formal scroll in his hands. "The dissolution documents are ready for signing." Lucian accepted the parchment, scanning the formal language that would officially end the conflict between their packs. But as he prepared to sign, Amara's hand covered his. "Wait," she said. "There's something else we need to discuss." She turned toward the assembled warriors from both packs, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "The blood bond between Blackthorn and Moonfang is dissolved, but that doesn't mean our packs have to remain enemies." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Surprise, curiosity, cautious hope. "What are you proposing?" Draven asked from where he stood under guard. "A new kind of alliance," Amara replied. "Not through forced marriages or magical compulsion, but through mutual benefit and respect. Trade agreements, shared defense against rogue threats, cultural exchange. And leadership? Selene asked quietly. Amara looked at Lucian, and he saw the question in her eyes. The choice she was offering him, offering them both. Partnership, he said firmly, between equals who choose to stand together. As he signed the dissolution papers with Amara's name flowing beneath his in elegant script, Lucian realized they weren't just ending a war. They were beginning a revolution. One built on love instead of fear. One that would change everything. Chapter 24. New Beginnings. 2 months after the battle that changed everything, Amara stood on the balcony of what had once been her prison and was now her sanctuary. The view from Lucian's, their chambers overlooked a valley, transformed by peace and prosperity. Nervous, Lucian's arms circled her waist from behind, his warmth chasing away the morning chill. Excited, she corrected, leaning back against his chest. Today feels like the real beginning. Below them, the courtyard buzzed with preparation for their official mating ceremony. Not the political farce her mother had arranged, but a celebration of choice freely made and love freely given. Representatives from 6 different packs had come to witness the union, including several alphas who'd initially opposed their unconventional alliance. But success spoke louder than tradition, and the prosperity their partnership had brought to both territories couldn't be denied. Your mother looks happy, Lucian observed. Amara followed his gaze to where Selene directed preparations with her usual efficiency, but there was something lighter in her movements, something that looked almost like joy. She's finally free too, Amara realized. Free to be a mother instead of just a political operator. And your father? Practically bouncing with excitement. She laughed, thinking of Marcus's enthusiasm for the approaching ceremony. I think he's more thrilled about officially welcoming you as a son than I am about the whole Luna thing. Speaking of which, Lucian's voice grew serious. Are you sure about this? Joining our packs means you'll be Luna to nearly 300 wolves. That's a lot of responsibility. Amara turned in his arms, studying the face that had become her anchor and her home. I'm sure about you. I'm sure about us. Everything else we'll figure out together. Together, he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like forever. A soft knock interrupted them before passion could fully ignite. Sorry to disturb, Marcus called through the door, but there's someone here to see you both. They separated reluctantly, curiosity overriding desire, as they made their way to the main hall. What they found waiting made Amara's breath catch in her throat. An elderly woman with silver hair and eyes the exact shade of jade as Amara's own stood in the center of the room. Power radiated from her in waves, not the dark magic of Seraphina's witchcraft, but something clean and ancient and unmistakably Veil. Great Aunt Cordelia? Amara whispered. Hello, little star. The woman's smile held warmth that chased away decades of loneliness. I came as soon as I felt the awakening. The family line calling to itself across impossible distances. But you're supposed to be dead. The records say what I needed them to say. Cordelia moved closer, her gaze taking in the silver markings that still decorated Amara's throat and shoulders. Sometimes the best way to protect something precious is to let the world think it's lost. Protect what? Knowledge, traditions, the true history of what we are and what we're capable of. Cordelia's expression grew serious. Your grandfather tried to warn you through the dagger, but there's so much more you need to learn. Lucian stepped closer to Amara's side, his protective instincts flaring. What kind of knowledge? The kind that will help you build something lasting, Cordelia replied. A pack alliance that could serve as a model for others. A new way of thinking about power and partnership. She gestured toward the window, where the ceremony preparations continued in full swing. What you're doing today, choosing love over politics, building bridges instead of walls, it matters more than you know. Because change is coming, Amara said, understanding dawning. Change has already come. You've proven that the old ways aren't the only ways. That strength can come from unity instead of domination. Cordelia's smile returned. But there's much work ahead, much to learn and teach and build. Are you staying? Hope colored Amara's voice. For a while, long enough to help you understand your heritage and prepare for what's coming. The older woman's eyes twinkled with mischief. Besides, I wouldn't miss my great-niece's mating ceremony for anything. As they talked and planned and dreamed about the future, Amara felt the last piece of her new life clicking into place. She had love, partnership, family, and purpose. She had everything she'd never dared to hope for, and the power to protect it all. The little girl who'd been sold like livestock was gone. In her place stood a woman who would reshape the very foundations of their world, and it was going to be magnificent.